The topic then that I selected was rebuilding trust and compassion in a COVID-19 world. And the main reason I selected this, I guess this title, is because I felt obviously that there are quite a few issues that we're facing right now that are threatening the very sustainability of our planet and all our species, including us, of course. And there's a need to raise public awareness or consciousness of the work that of the need, I guess, to work together to find solutions. And anytime we have an opportunity to dialogue, to exchange information, especially across the globe, I think we need to take that opportunity and sort of listen and open our minds to new ideas. The focus, therefore, let me just go on here. The focus is on rebuilding trust and compassion, and it's on sustainability, really. And there are several themes that I would like to proceed through. One of them is to put things in perspective, put the planet, our planet, in perspective, where we are, look at some of the existential risks that many of you know as much about as I do, and perhaps share the same concerns. I'd like to take a look at briefly on the United Nations global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, and some of the obstacles really in achieving these, definitely by 2030. Then a few slides on rethinking resilient societies, where I'd like to bring in the whole trust factor and the need for more compassion across the globe. And another major theme will deal with the International One Health for One Planet Education Initiative, One HOPE, as part of the human development effort that we might be making this year and subsequent years. And then finally conclude with Generation Z, talk more about that and their role, potential role, including, of course, the most important one perhaps is helping to safeguard the planet. And followed by, as Maria said, question and answer. So I thought that what might be of interest to some of you would be sort of sharing very quickly a personal journey toward One Health and Wellbeing. So I'd like to begin, I suppose, with the first book that I wrote was really on transforming medical education for 21st century. That's after spending 10, 12 years with the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Southampton. So a lot of the reforms and a lot of the issues that came up against or that came across are involved in are in this particular text. But one of the issues that caught my attention a lot over the 10, 12 years that I was there was really the issue relating to public health and the sort of the short shrift that public health was getting in comparison to clinical medicine. So that was then the second book, which came out in 2016. It relates definitely, it refers to the history of public health, its future, and so on. And it was actually during while I was writing the draft, that somehow I was connected with the One Health Commission, Dr. Cheryl Stroud, and Dr. Bruce Kaplan, and Dr. Laura Kahn from the One Health Initiative, who sort of engaged me in discussions about, basically, what do you know about One Health? And I must say at that time, being very much a traditionalist, I really didn't know nearly enough, obviously. But then working with the commission and the initiative, One Health Initiative, as chair of the task force on education and so on and so forth, in 3 or 4 years, I became aware about the critical issues involving One Health. And the penny, I guess, finally dropped in 2015 when I was preparing this particular draft. In the ensuing years, then, I started to think about One Health, talked to people about One Health, wrote some papers and so on, and then came out in 2019 with another book which focuses really on One Health and Wellbeing, called Survival, One Health, One Planet, One Future. That was followed recently by another chapter I was asked to write on the leadership that the universities and higher education might be needing to take at this particular point in time in order to save the world from itself. And this then led, along several other articles I've written and so on, but to one article, invited article on rebuilding trust and compassion in the COVID-19 world. And it is this particular article that really prompted or stimulated my wish, actually, to do this particular webinar. So in terms of putting things into perspective, I think, what's going on here? What is important is sort of to take a faraway look at where we are and where we've come from and where we might be going. So I'm not going to read any of these. Maybe just you know as much about this as I do, I'm sure. But it all started the Big Bang in 13.7 billion years ago. Atoms and molecules followed, following by organisms, followed by the first energy cell, which gave rise to complex life. And according to recent research at the University of Southampton, by the earth science people there, we're really, really lucky, is really the conclusion of their study, because of, we're still here as a planet, surviving because of good luck, which is interesting. Another aspect that I felt quite extraordinary is that our, Homo sapien, early human migration actually started about 2.5 million years ago. We were just another species. 1.75 million years ago, when we were just another species, and Homo erectus, you can see on the map on the right-hand side, sort of, went across the world and migrated and made spaces for themselves. Only 200,000 years ago, it's important to know that modern Homo sapiens, not behaviorally, but certainly from a physical point of view, came into being 200,000 years ago. And it's important also to recall, and I think this is a very important issue, is that we are all descended from a small group, maybe 10,000 folks, after a massive ice age 70,000 years ago, of Africans who began the journey of our ancestors. So I think that's an important issue to make, because all of us, regardless where we are on the planet now, we originated, from that spot in Africa, Southern Africa. And this is the migratory path that was taken. So there are several major revolutions, I suppose you could call them, that shaped the course of our history. About 70,000 years ago, maybe related to the Ice Age and so on and so forth, there was sort of a cognitive awakening, a cognitive revolution experienced by Homo sapiens. 12,000 years ago, agricultural revolution, but only 500 years ago, the scientific revolution. 80 years ago, only 80 years ago, the first antibiotic. Medical students have trouble with understanding that, I remember. 30 years ago, the information revolution, and today, what some people may agree, we could say the sustainability revolution. So we've achieved a lot, as you can see on the just examples of human achievements over the years, whether it's flight, whether it's painting, art, pyramids, and so on and so forth. But the point really that needs to be made is that our human progress has come at a huge price. Our planet's sustainability is at risk, and so is our life. And our social values have not, I feel, in my research and my writing and my thinking, of course, have not kept pace, societal values, with the tremendous progress and technology in the sciences and so on. So we're still, at the early stages of tackling inequality, justice, peace, and truth. So some of the existential challenges, well, to contextualize that a bit, it appears that the natural world contains about 8.7 million species today. The vast majority of these species have not yet even been identified. It will take years to do so. It's also important maybe to remember that 99, close to 100% of all species over the Earth's history are now extinct. So what we're facing now, though, is quite a few factors coming together. But one of the main factors is really the huge population explosion since 1900. You can see the graph on the over there, and it's certainly up to about 7.8 billion people right now. But you can see it was very flat for many, many years. And you can see on this particular graphic where the concentration of human beings: Africa 1.1 billion people, India 1.3 billion people, China 1.2 billion people, and so on. It's interesting too, as I reflect, that only in January 2020, the World Economic Forum came out with an excellent report for the first time focusing entirely on climate change and its impact. But if you look closely, no one was able to predict where we are today, because infectious diseases came as, I think it was ranked number 10 at that time. So we are now in the midst of the 6th mass extinction phase. The last one was 66 million years ago, when the dinosaurs were wiped out. The difference between that era and our situation today is, without a doubt, human activity has been and continues to be the dominant influence on climate, the environment, and our future. And there are maybe 3 key issues. Again, you know about these as much as I do, I'm sure. Climate change, the biosphere, zoonotic diseases. I'll have a close look at, first of all, the climate change. Well, again, I did not know this until a few months ago, but I paid attention again to carbon emissions and so on. But we are now seeing the rate of carbon emissions, CO2, being the highest in 66 million years. You can see the fairly recent chart there. And temperature. In fact, in Europe, the hottest temperature was experienced in 2020. And of course, you may remember the 2015, the world got together, excellent, and they agreed with the Paris Climate Agreement in December 2015, and it was ratified by 187 nations. The United States, unfortunately, withdrew, but I think that will be changing very shortly when President-elect Biden takes over. And the point of the Paris Climate Agreement is a pledge, really, to keep long-term average temperatures increased to about 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels, if they can. If they go up to 2, 3, 4, I think there will be catastrophes. The report written in 2018, the writers of the, the authors of that report said something also that stuck with me, which was really, they said basically, to put it bluntly, there's a significant risk of self-reinforcing climate feedback loops, pushing the planet into chaos beyond control. In other words, if we keep on feeding the planet, if we keep on undermining the health and well-being of the planet, there may come a tipping point where there's nothing that we can do about it as human beings. Now, the biosphere, this is the biosphere. But if you look at what's happening to our atmosphere, ecosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, the mantle of our planet, and so on, we are, I think, at huge risk in each of these areas. Oh, about this one again. So the threat of one of the main problems, of course, that we're facing this year, and maybe for a few more years to come, and maybe forever, is the threat of viral outbreaks, which are growing rapidly. Population, wildlife encroachment, and so on, globalization. And of course, this chart was interesting too for me, is that this particular graphic was in a book or an article in 2017, predicting this and predicting the curve. And of course, global 19 is about here. So we know that we have known for a long time now that things have been coming. I don't think we knew how extensive the damage has been. The cost of responding to COVID-19 is unprecedented. Currently, it's estimated about $5 to $7 trillion has been the cost of COVID-19. What is becoming clear too, though, is that the COVID-19 is a class issue. It is the poor, it is the vulnerable who catch the disease and die from it. Just looking at the United Kingdom, where the most cases and most deaths are, it is in those areas where, of deprivation, mostly. Although, London is maybe a mix of all of these. But the reality is that it's estimated that in this year alone, over 3 billion people out of close to 50% of these 7.8 billion, and new people will be impacted by COVID-19. So when it started, COVID-19 was, I recall, January 22nd. I don't think we paid a lot of attention to it. It's just one of those things that happens in foreign countries. But before we knew it, today the confirmed cases were up to the confirmed cases were up to 1.9 million, and as of January the 15th, yesterday, the death rate across the globe is 90.7 million. So if you look at a map, I don't think there's any country that is spared from COVID-19. So we're paying a very high price for global neglect, complacency, because only in 2013, a researcher at Harvard, Olga Jonas, in her research, she calculated at that time that the cost of a pandemic would be between 1.9 to 3.4 billion dollars per year. But we know it's much more now. Even the United States, as we speak, Biden has just come up with a COVID recovery plan, and he's talking between close to $2 trillion. In the United Kingdom, a few days ago, a new charter called the Terra Carta has come out, inspired by the Prince of Wales, focusing on sustainability. And he and his group of associates are hoping to invest $10 billion in environmental initiatives, a roadmap for private sector. What he's about and what they're about is building a greener future. And what's new is that they are actually, he's focusing, all of his life is focused on nature and giving nature fundamental rights and value to it. So other existential, as we don't have enough, but certainly population growth is one of them. Certainly the absence of public health is another big issue, as well as health in general, clinical health. There are two countries in Africa I'm thinking of now where the ratio between doctors and patients is 50,000 to 1. One health worker to 50,000 people. Other issues have to do with modernity, our way of life. Certainly AMR was discussed, excellent informative discussion yesterday by Laura. And of course, we still have a lot to think about in terms of why do we have wars? Somebody called it the greatest failure of humanity, can't disagree. And human rights violations. The question I have, every day, why, when I listen to the news or media and read about these things, why do we have people on this planet who think it's okay to make other people suffer. Artificial intelligence is another one that we need to face. You know, I could talk a lot more about that, but you know, and its role in our humanity and retaining our humanity. And we know some of the, you know, things that have happened in the last few days, how dangerous they are to democracy, to the world. So rightly so, the United Nations came up with the global goals, first in 2000, and then again in 2015. And they are, you know, the aim is really commendable: ending poverty, protecting the lives of people, and you know, the problem is in the last since COVID has come along, this last decade, we have seen an epochal reversal of all the gains, pretty well all the gains made since the 1990s with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals. Just about all of them have actually returned, including poverty. And we'll go through all of these. And there's no doubt there needs to be a commitment to new global values, principles, and actions, which are happening in different ways at the moment, but maybe not enough. One of the biggest problems, I think I've alluded to it already, read about in the paper the other day, is democracy. If you look at this map, no time to get into all the details here, but you know, look at the green, the dark green. These are apparently the only full democratic nations or regions left on the planet, according to 60, 70 criteria that they're using. There are a lot of flawed democracies, a lot of hybrid regimes, and a lot, too many, authoritarian regimes. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is the economy. And I remember Edward Lucas, he was former senior editor at The Economist, saying in one of his articles, and he said basically, for a start, we need to accept that business and finance are the servants of our civilization, not its masters. I think the cartoon makes, you know, none of us can think that anymore. But there's a flaw in that thinking as well, because of what's happened with COVID-19. Because it's become very clear that the biosphere is now the master. And whether you're rich, poor, or whatever, you know, we are all affected. And from the Stockholm Resilience Organization, I really like this particular depiction of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have the economy, the need now, more than ever, for the economy to serve society. But we too are at the mercy of or dependent on the biosphere. And our economy is depending on our activities. What's important too is that there are goals and targets, SDG goals and targets that you know, provide evidence of the status of what is and what may need to be done. So the idea of a circular economy is important. You know, yesterday again, Laura was talking about mitigating or eliminating waste and so on. I think we need to really think about that now, not maybe 5 years from now. So when I wrote this book, Survival, I know one day I was towards the end, I remember writing a chapter, and I was thinking, well, what's this all about, George? You know, what are the sort of messages that you like to get out? And I think what I've tried to do is really to rebuild trust and compassion by addressing root causes. So these are 10 propositions. I'm not going to bore with you with going through them, of course, but these are the key. And number 7 is very, very important because it talks about potentially assuming or, you know, agreeing that the One Health and Wellbeing concept becomes the cornerstone of our societies and our educational systems. So what I've said. And also, I think number 8 is so important that we, 7.8 billion people, we accept the responsibility that we are the frontliners, custodians of the planet. And I don't think that's recognized by too many industries and too many people in power. The other thing that I think is really very important is that the United Nations, which agreed, 193 countries agreed the Sustainable Development Goals. Unfortunately, though, it's easy to sign, but it's not easy to say we're going to translate what we're signing into reality. Equality, democracy, tolerance, and respect. The other area which I find extremely disconcerting is that the United Nations Security Council, with the big 5 countries, China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, France, they are basically in charge of maintaining world peace and security across the globe. However, this is my concern, is that the UNSC was established in 1946 after the Second World War. And the world from in the last 70 years or so years, the world has changed so much. In fact, as we've seen, many more billions of people live in the global south, the global east. But none of these have basically a permanent voice at this very, very important committee. And yet they are the fastest population, that they have the fastest population growth and social and economic disparities, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and so on. But they do not have a voice around the table. Now, it's not easy to change this. However, we must bring the United Nations up to the 21st century. The big challenge is how we think. And I liked what Ron Guerin in his book, he was an astronaut for 6 months. He was zooming around the planet. But one of the things that came to him after 6 months up in space is that it's time to shift our perspective from two-dimensional thinking to three-dimensional orbital thinking. And we need to think about how our decisions today will affect us tomorrow. So, what are some of the obstacles in achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? It talks about democracy. We have to strive towards a new normal. That means basically that society, we have to change in response to new threats and opportunities. I mean, that's rational, isn't it? And that means basically that COVID-19, the world requires societal and workforce development. New knowledge, new values, knowledge, competencies. Our greatest challenge in this regard is changing our worldview. I really think if we can't do this, then SDGs and whatever good we're trying to do is really going to be undermined. And the worldview basically tells us that we need to think less about what's in it for us, human centrism, and think what's in it for the planet, so that the needs of both are met. Very hard to do, because it's very difficult to change social behaviors. Social change. But a lot of excellent thinkers have thought about this. There's an article that Angela Gurria, Secretary General of OECD, wrote, which basically says, I think we're hearing this a lot now, but we need a world that's characterized by green and inclusive recovery. We're talking about income, jobs, well-being goals at its core. And this is not only, I think he was probably referring to humans, but I'm thinking of well-being of the planet. So we need strong climate and biodiversity action and building resilience, and we need stimulus packages to get countries, especially the countries that are so poor, to get them off the ground. Then I came across over here, a blog written by Susan McMillan. She's with the International Livestock Research Institute. And she quoted two people who really, gained my attention, Ted Nordhaus and Alex Tremeth. Basically, these are some things that they are saying, which I thought was really insightful. Progress often advances as much through a crisis as by increment. The only way to mitigate the negative environmental externalities produced by economic growth is through it. We need economic growth, definitely, but it's, I think, a different type of economic growth than what we're used to. And we do need growth, we need modernization, we need technological innovation. But I think it has to be, all of this has to be tempered by humanity, by our human values. One person whom I greatly admire because of his human values is Barack Obama. As he says in this, this excerpt here, it's up to us really to work together to create a new normal in which bigotry, unequal treatment no longer infects our institutions or our hearts. This new book, or a book came out a couple of months ago, I think it's really excellent. And then thinking about another current study that was done on what do people in 2020, how have they felt about their expectations and about what are their fears. In this study here, I think I've got the link there. Basically, we all have fears about jobs, the economy, the future, access to the truth, and equality. And if national governments need to deal with that in their national plans, there's no doubt. Also like something that the United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Amina J. Mohammed from Nigeria said, we have to become more humble. I mean, after all, it's one little virus that has brought the world to a standstill. And we need to work and act together. Will the people listen who should be listening? I'm not sure. So we need empathy and compassion. And I think the biggest thing that maybe we have learned is behavioral integrity. What leaders are saying is very closely related to what they do. It's perhaps one of the important lessons for all of us and for the leaders. So getting to some very positive things now, I think the international, before we get into that, the international scene in terms of education is not healthy. That is, I'll take that back though. It is definitely not healthy. 86% of primary education students across the world are out of school, compared with just 20% in countries with high human development. So we're talking Africa, India. Oops. So there's, since 1990, there's been a Human Development Index, which makes that very clear. It's based on criteria related to health, education, income. Now, if you look at the line, it's very blue. From 1990 right up to 2018, start to get less strong. But then in 2020, the whole world stopped. So what we have now is really a Human Development Index where health, life expectancy, years of education, income, as we now know, are under attack. So it really is time to stop, think, and do. Look at the root causes, what's really behind all this. And it's also time to, as has happened throughout this week, to consider, to think about One Health and Well-being. Because to me, it's more than just a concept. To me, it is the concept. It is a movement, an approach. It's becoming, I think, a philosophy. And it does say something about the interface among humans, animals, plants, in a shared environment. So one thing I've said, in different forums, I said, we can take the humans out of this equation and this planet will thrive. But if we take animals out, and we're here, and plants out, then this is just, the planet will not work. And really that's what is happening. And we need to learn to collaborate much differently and better than what we've done before. It's good to see the World Bank and so many other organizations have, are behind the One Health concept now. I don't know, they're countless. I think there's so many across the world now. So the One Health concept, and when in 2013, 2014, 15, when I was reading articles and so on, was very much concerned with the interface, the interplay between veterinary medicine and human medicine, which is right, is absolutely right. However, what I'm arguing here and what's arguing in my book is beyond that. It's so fundamental to our survival that it's beyond that. It applies to all species, that planet. It's transdisciplinary, and here are some of the disciplines that came to mind when I, that are impacted by One Health and Well-being, including the disciplines that are taught in university and school systems, courses, and so on. It is so fundamental. It applies to all policies and strategies, as you can see here. And education is at the heart of this, of moving us along. That's education, not necessarily formal, but could be very much non-formal. We learn as much, I think, by listening to others informally as we do in any class. So the One Health and Wellbeing initiative, One Hope, is an initiative that basically aims to build global capacity for promoting and valuing One Health and Wellbeing concept as a foundation for achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I don't, maybe I need to learn more, but I'm comfortable with the One Health and Wellbeing concept. The Sustainable Development Goals are excellent, but I wonder sometimes whether it doesn't need One Health and Wellbeing as to underpin it, to make sense of how important they really are. So the One Hope initiative is currently with working groups, I'll just get this out, developing working groups across regions, global regions, in education, community, civil society, government, non-government organizations, corporate, through working groups and affiliations. So it started, just take a few moments to mention this, but it started, as I think already alluded to, it started several years ago with the One Health Commission, Dr. Cheryl Stroud, and the One Health Initiative, Dr. Bruce Kaplan, Dr. Laura Kahn as co-founders. And the progress with the working groups in Africa and the Americas, I think, has been steady. Not always fast, but steady. And as you can see here, here's some of the working groups that we've developed in the last year or so with the facilitators or chairs next to the names. So we're making some progress. We were making some progress until I think definitely January 2020. Because the societal impact on One Hope has been tremendous in all education, in all communities. And all of our minds has been taken away, have been taken from anything to do with, the longer term plans and so on. So what we're doing, what we need to do, I feel, with COVID, with One Hope, is we need to build on the progress that we have made to date, and we need to reflect on future directions. And we need to build a consultation paper where we start to think about our working groups. How can we get recruitment? How can we engage the other regions? Organizational aspects, what's most facilitative, supportive, administrative support, funding, external advisor groups. We have 40 organizations have come on board to support One Hope, others to come yet. And our affiliations in the regions have to be looked at, including, of course, the ISOHA as an example, and partnerships. So we need to rethink our goals, our aims, and how we might get there. There's no doubt in my mind, though, that the One Hope concept and practices can really strengthen education at all levels, and community awareness, and raise awareness at all levels, and so on. So one example of this is really a project that we currently have going in Africa with the University of Pretoria, and webinar series. What you see here is it's really about building transdisciplinary research capacity amongst students, graduate students, people in various careers and so on who are interested in doing research. And basically, we've had 2 webinars so far. We have one more to come very soon. There's on January the 27th, there's webinar 3, which is very student-centered. What do students think about this? Graduate students and so on, in veterinary medicine and other areas from other areas. So if anybody's interested listening here, do get in touch with Stefan Dippenaar at the University of Pretoria and maybe express an interest. I think this particular example of One Hope linking with a particular initiative, I think, is really something we might want to look at in other regions as well. So we're almost there. Well, what about the future then? Well, I think I'm a very strong supporter of the young people. People, I know some use the term Generation Z. These are people born, I think, around 1996, in the middle of the 1990s, who are definitely going to be the leaders, many of whom will be leaders in this century. And I think we need to, more educated, social, very pragmatic, connected, tolerant, and so on. And I think we need to really, many of these people are in the ISOHA, there's no doubt. They can help to raise public consciousness of some of the issues that do matter to all of us. One book, I know that Laura had a few books that she shared. One book that I like to share is a recent book that David Attenborough wrote, A Life on Our Planet, which I think is absolutely excellent, because he is one person, he's 94, 95, he's lived life, and he actually, in his book, makes us realize, understand how serious the situation is. And he looks ahead to 2030, what's going to happen to the Brazilian rainforest, 2040, what happens with the permafrost thaws, what happens with the 2050 figures, the coral reefs might have a huge bearing on fish population, and so on and so forth. It's definitely worth a read. In the cover here, there's a 60-minute interview that he gave that you may want to have a look at, or listen to, view in future. It's really, really important, critical actually. And he comes up with this 7 or 8. I don't have time here today. We don't have time to, major directions to save the planet. So we have a choice. It's either we tackle the climate risks, or we face, according to David Attenborough and others, of course, an inhospitable planet by 2100. 40, it could be 4 degrees, it could be more, whatever. It is important to recognize that we need to do things right now. Then, just to mention very quickly, somebody at Greenpeace International said he basically said the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, scaling to 46 years. Interesting concept. Humans have been here for 4 hours. The Industrial Revolution began 1 minute ago, and in that time, we have destroyed more than half the world's forests. And I wonder, what about the next 15 seconds? So, ending on on a positive note, there is definitely a need for course correction on our planet. So I've mentioned her name before, Susan Macmillan. And she wrote a blog, with the title "Taking Stock, Keeping Faith with Human Progress," which I think is so important. I'm not going to go through all these 8, but some of her revelations, that's what they really are really important. For one thing, she said, what we've got out of 2020 is nature has to be respected. Inequalities have to be exposed. And she says, we can do amazing things when we are focused and we can work together. That's really what One Health is all about. And the others are equally important. So to conclude then, somebody says to me, why One Health? Well, I keep thinking, well, really, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And I think One Health really, its greatest attribute, its greatest benefit really to all of us has been to identify all the things that do matter to for our survival. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. George, for your presentation and for covering so many different resources that we can refer to. I'm sure you've given the audience a lot of food for thought. So without further ado, we'll move on to the Q&A bit. So anyone in the audience, if you have a question still, just keep them coming. I think we have quite a few already in the bank, so let's get started. And Dr. George, are you able to pull up the chat on your side as well?
Am I able to what, sorry?
Are you able to pull up the chat box on your side just to see the questions?
Oh, I'll try.
Or I can read out the first one for you. So the first question, because it's by Bamlak Kasahun and he's not able to ask the question himself, so I will do it on his behalf, and I've put it on the chat as well. So the question is, in your opinion, how long will it take for the world to adopt a One Health approach and mentality?
It's a very good question. It depends, I think, to a large extent about the plans that that nations have. And for example, I think with Biden in the United States, it's becoming very clear that the One Health is already actually an integral part of the Senate, I think, in the United States. I think Biden is going to keep it going and raise its awareness in the next 3-4 years. In the United Kingdom, the same. And there are countries, of course, likewise. In terms of the whole world, I just don't know. There's a lot of politics involved. I think of right now that are not democratic. One of a collective agreement that from different perspectives, as Simon said last Monday, that if you keep out some of the people who are key to making One Health and one being a reality in practice, in life, very difficult if you keep some of these people out. So I'm hoping the younger people will encourage the ones who are really resistant to create this public consciousness and awareness and raise the issues. I think with COVID-19 we have turned a corner in terms of our thinking and reflection. I read recently that the United States and China are very happy to talk about climate change again when Biden gets going. I think that could be because climate change affects all the countries of the world, close to 200 countries of the world. I think climate change could be the key to open the door for dialogue. And this dialogue might lead to other things. Fingers crossed.
Thank you for your response. Before we go to our next question, my colleague has just reminded me that we will be posting the link for all of you participants to mark your attendance in the chat box whilst the Q&A is going on, so you don't have to stay on too late after the meeting. So do look out in the chat for that. The next question we have, Dr. George, is by Marilyn Bruno. Not so much a question, but I think she has some comments to make. So I will let you unmute yourself, Marilyn, if you'd like to start a discussion.
Thank you so much. What a treat. And congratulations for this excellent program and global awareness effort. I have a personal story. I was an economic officer at the State Department in the 2000s when bird flu and swine flu had erupted. And my job was to coordinate with my counterparts around the world to start tracking such outbreaks. And what became clear through the WHO was that there was no overriding policy infrastructure. And the UN One Health approach was articulated to bring WHO, FAO, and OIE together to understand and promulgate the concept that you can't have pandemic control without addressing the pathogens at the three vectors of transmission: animals, humans, and the environment. In 2008, I retired from State Department to found a company called ACOR, where we discovered chemicals in the ocean that are natural antimicrobials with remarkable antibiofilm properties. And the common denominator for the spread of the AMR pathogens is their ability to form thicker and thicker biofilm. It's why they are resistant. You can kill them if they're free floating, but they immediately envelop themselves in an impenetrable shield. And we are developing products, as far as we know, that we're the only company that's developed products for environmental control of the pathogens, water treatment, surface cleaners, and other applications in the environment, animal and human health, as well as the new drug candidates that, of course, have gotten nowhere because this is a highly charged political issue. When I was at State Department, I was prohibited from using the two words climate and change in the same sentence because Al Gore, who was the vice president under Bill Clinton, had promulgated the idea of global warming. And he, of course, lost the election in great part because the mega industries were threatened by the measures that had to be taken in the year 2000 to curb global warming. CO2 emissions impacted the transportation and petroleum industries, the chemical industries, and down the line. And he did produce a movie called which is very significant here because it was recognized, the inconvenient truth. And it is still an inconvenient truth. It's a truth, but it's inconvenient. And unfortunately, the public was bombarded with pseudoscientists that debunked the concept of global warming. But it is the crisis that we're in. So, I mean, we can look to the young people, but I say, shame on my generation for failing those young people to start. I mean, the only language that seems to be understood is monetary. If there are fines, if there are sanctions, if investors walk away from companies that are contributing to this crisis, that might make a dent in what looks like a railroad train hurtling to disaster and bringing all of us with them. I've been at this for a long time, and I welcome support of any kind, because we have found no grants, we found no investors. It's almost like the convenience of the truth overshadows the problem we are all in together. So I was able to speak very briefly on the role biofilm is playing in all of this, and One Health, and hope that the UN can continue putting this at the top of their agenda. I know that following this carefully, I see World Health, World Economic Forum, the G8, you know, it seems to me to be lip service. There has to be some real clout put behind reducing CO2 emissions. We're involved through ACOR on so many levels of green energy and so forth as a beginning, but it's a very big story, and so happy to be able to join your community.
Well, thank you very much. I agree with everything that you say, that you've said, and the difficulty of gaining, I guess, the difficulty of getting beyond the politics, and the difficulty of getting beyond the avarice and the ambitions, and the difficulty of gaining the trust again, I guess, on many sides, and the difficulty, I guess, of developing compassion. If you think of the migrants and so on coming from various countries in the last, 20 years and so on, and what happens to the challenges are huge. And I would like to be optimistic in the sense that COVID-19 is certainly, as somebody said, it's a supernova disaster, that's impacted on the world. I don't know how many, I should say, I don't know how many people who are authoritarians, who profess it doesn't exist, it's a hoax. I don't know how many people like that can not include the need for change in their speeches, in their lectures, in their whatever they're doing, politicking. They can't, because the suffering of the people will be shown, will be demonstrated. And I think, I say younger people, I'm hoping that many of these younger people, Generation Z, or millennia, that these people will go into politics, become economics, experts in economics and so on, into different areas that are needed right now, and bring a different perspective, which is very hard to do. However, there are some changes that one is seeing. I mean, I think with Prince Charles, here in the UK, he has signed up quite a few, BT and oil companies and so on and so forth. It's a £10 billion initiative he's striving toward. He will be the next king of England, of the United Kingdom. I think he'll have a voice. I think there are countries, certainly the Norwegian, certainly the Nordic countries, and so on and so forth. But we need to do something to raise awareness and to remind the people who are in power that their way of thinking, if they are not helping, not supporting, needs to be challenged. And this is where I bring the United Nations in, the Security Council, because it really has to start there. Now, I don't know if the nation what can be done, but certainly the five that are there are okay, but two of them, as far as I can see, Britain and France, represent only 1% of the world population. I'm nothing against the fact that they're there, but we need to bring in people who represent billions. And I hope that Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, and Amina Mohammed, that they are able to see the changes needed and put that others will listen to. I think the change has to start way at the top. While we do but one hope, for example, that it's a gradual thing. So the question earlier was, how long will it take? Is a very hard question to answer. I think I'd like to change the question though. How long do we have before, okay, according to the IPCC study that came out in May of 2018, at that time, the scientists, the 4,000 scientists gave us about 10 years before the climate, would undo us somehow. We're well on our way. I mean, plastic in oceans and so on and so forth. How long do we have? And when leaders understand that their families, that they themselves are also affected, as COVID is doing, the elderly, leaders and so on have died and so on, can't change that, unfortunately. When they see there's more to this life and so on, when they realize that we are all mortal, maybe they will change a bit. I'm hoping, I don't know. I think we need more discussions like this across the regions with different people involved from the regions. Case. And I think this is where maybe One Hope could help as well. I'm hoping. Sorry about that.
Thank you to both sides for sharing your opinions. So our next participant who wants to ask a question is Sajid Dibaba. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. Hopefully you'll be able to.
Okay, thank you. My question is, on one of your slides, you indicated that our genetic side. I just want you to elaborate on that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, it took millions of years for our genes to evolve. And I suppose since these, I hate to put a century on this, but certainly since the Industrial Revolution, the way that we were nurtured, the way that we have, evolved away from the family, sort of, away from collaboration, away from helping each other more, and to the society, then to sort of the industrial society, to the, somebody said, the McDonaldization of society, fast food, fast delivery, and all this, has changed media, television, and so on, has changed us a lot. COVID-19 is changing us a lot, and behaviors in our houses right now are changing us a lot. But what that I think is saying that basically some of the fundamental genes that we still carry are opposite to our health in terms of how we live, what we eat, what we do. I think that slide was showing substance abuse. That slide was showing care of the elderly. The substance, the slide was showing, trying to recall now, a number of human activities now that are anathema, that are against who we are, our genes. And basically, if you look back to the investigations, the research that's been done on ancient Stone Age dwellers, 30,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, and they've actually have demonstrated that these people then, who only lived to be about 30 on average, but these people then had absolutely no cardiovascular problems. They had they had excellent teeth. They had, they had a very hard life, obviously, but from a physical point of view, they were outstanding compared to us. I'm talking about the obesity problems that we're facing globally, and so on and so forth. So our genes, our makeup, our human makeup, was not meant for so many external forces to change us. We have nothing to fight with. And, so basically, I suppose that's what that slide was trying to say.
Thank you for your answer, Dr. George. So the next question is by Noor Aziza Azara. I will now let you unmute yourself. But there's two of you that show up on my Zoom call, but hopefully I've unmuted the right one. Hello?
Okay.
Hi.
Thank you very much for allowing me to ask the question. Thank you so much for your excellent presentation, Dr. George. Hi, I'm Zara from Indonesia. So my question is, what is the most vital thing in dealing with emerging infectious disease? As we know, it's a complex issue and many factors lead to its emergence, like climate change, lifestyle, microbial adaptation, and etc. Thank you.
I got, the sound here was not that clear. Maybe, Sean, could you repeat the question?
I also had trouble hearing it. Aziza, do you have a microphone that you could use? If not, I could read your question out. Do you want to try again? I've allowed you to unmute yourself again.
Is it clear?
Can you hear it on your end, Dr. George?
Yes.
Maybe just ask a bit slower. It's not the clearest, but we can give it a go. And if he still can't hear you, I will read it for you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, I guess she's assuming I'll read it. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Aziza, your question is, and I'll put it on the chat for you as well, Dr. George. The question is, what is the most vital thing in dealing with emerging infectious diseases? So she recognizes it's a complex issue and many factors leads to the emergence of infectious diseases like climate change, lifestyle, and microbial adaptation. But I guess according to your opinion, what is the most important thing to deal with the emergence of new diseases?
Prevention is probably the most important. I think the issue with prevention is actually very important. In the split between clinical medicine and public health occurred actually in 1915 in the United States, when St. John's Hopkins University, the first dean there of public health, the split occurred between the clinical health of people and the public health of people. And that split has been dramatic, because when that occurred in 1915, the funding, for example, most of the funding for health care went towards clinical health. 95% is still the case today. Today, 5% is given towards prevention. Most of the courses, including medicine, veterinary medicine, and many, many other courses I can think about, focus on treatment, intervention, rather than prevention. So even today with COVID-19, we can see the problem, whereby people do not want to wear masks, people do not want to socially disengage, they want this and this and this, and we see the fallout of this attitude. And I think to a large extent, in terms of emerging diseases, infectious diseases, that is a big part. I think another participant mentioned something else. I think it's important. I think it's how we go about responding in future to epidemics. I think she mentioned the importance of mapping, viral mapping of pandemics. And I think some of those aspects are extremely important to do by all countries. Where did the disease come from in the United States? So viral mapping, I think more research into pandemics is very important. The development of tools and innovations to share amongst each other, with each other, as we're doing, I think, to a large extent now with COVID-19. I think extremely important, and going right back to the beginning here, I suppose, is the recognizing the interface or the interplay between humans, animals, and the environment. And I think several of the speakers this week have made that point as well.
Thank you, Dr. George. Next question is by Tajuddin Yusuf Amuda. And I will let you unmute yourself now. Hi, Tajuddin, are you there? It will just give you a couple of seconds to see if you can unmute yourself. If not, I will ask your question for you. Oh, hello.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, doctor, and thank you for the insightful presentation. My question is that, is there any tools on global health, like the one used in institution, like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change? The kind of tools they use in describing and comparing possible future challenges. So do we have something like that on global health institutions?
Could you, okay. Again, the sound went here a bit, Sean. So do we have something like what? Say this again.
Like any tools on global health institution, like those used in Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, like a kind of tools that they use in predicting future challenges, like future challenges in climate change. So do we have something like that, like intergovernmental panels in global health that we can use to prescribe that we can use to describe and compare future possible outbreaks of any risk in the future?
I think yes, I think I think some tools do exist. Offhand now, Harvard University, for example, the Institute of Global Health there is one that I would certainly look for in terms of what they would suggest. Off the top of my head, I think so much more research with COVID-19. I don't want to avoid your question, but with COVID-19 and all the others, in the early part of this century, really millennium, MERS and so on and so forth, Ebola, so many unique situations started the pandemics or epidemics or pandemics. Many of these, as we know, started with the animal world and transferred to humans, and eventually humans to animals as well. And my main concern is that we may have tools, but one of my main concerns really is that if you go back to Sierra Leone today, where Ebola, killed 14,000 people, and you were to go to the wet markets and so on and so forth, if you were to go to many parts of China, and there are cultural issues here with food and so on and so forth, and it seems to me that our biggest challenge is to get the people in power, in charge for these countries, to recognize that they may need to, as we do too in our culture, we need to rethink how we live, and not to change. People, very difficult to change behaviors, but to think in terms of not only having these tools, but think in terms of what changes are needed to avoid, diseases coming from bats or Angola and so on and so forth. And I think that's the biggest issue. So we can have tools to say, under these circumstances, such and such the probability is high. All right, but in terms of the infrastructure to support prevention of this, it's just not there. Sierra Leone, and in terms of, and I think COVID-19 has taught us, is teaching us that it's getting worse. And as the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations said, it only takes one virus to start this, and the world is at a standstill. So there's no, there might, off the top of my head, I wouldn't say there's a checklist that people can use. They must exist, through virus mapping, research, tools that people are using today. Question though is, why did we not, knowing what we know, why did we not do something about what we know was coming? There were reports written in the United States, especially, and in Europe as well, on on the importance of doing something about the pandemics and epidemics and pandemics, getting prepared. And these reports were really good, excellent reports with excellent recommendations. But in the United Kingdom, I know for a fact, in 2016, a report came out, which was sort of a military style, what will happen, what we need to do, and so on. And the recommendations actually were not publicized, not published widely. So along with these tools, we need the political will to engage in the serious discussions that need to be held in order to prevent or to mitigate the severity. Now we know COVID-19, is there going to be a COVID-23, 25, 26? We've learned a lot, and I don't think we know yet in terms of how to pull all this together. But I think this COVID-19 is an opportunity for decision makers to do just that.
Thank you, Dr. George. I think we have our final question for the evening so far, and this is by Alberto. So I'm going to let you unmute yourself, Alberto.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Dr. George, for your insights. My question is about if, in your opinion, would it be necessary a United Nations-based authority in order to address the ecological major threats? I mean, because of deforestation, mass species extinction, and in general, loss of biodiversity are pointed as major driving forces of emerging infectious diseases, threats, along other risks. Maybe a new international authority is necessary for prevention, but also for restoration of key damaged ecosystems. In that sense, what are your opinion or recommendations to address this complex issue? Thank you.
Again, Alberto, it came out, I think the technology is really, Sean, could you sort of summarize that for me?
I read it. I wrote it. I wrote.
You wanna...
I wrote it in the, if you could read it for me, please.
Yep, I will. I will post it as well, just on the chat. So this is your summarized version. So Alberto is asking, in your opinion, Dr. George, would it be necessary for a UN-based authority to address the ecological major threats we're facing? Is that right, Alberto? Did I get it right?
Yeah. Yes. There is another summary after that.
to address the to address the ecological. Is that what I'm getting? We're
To
facing
address the ecological major threats.
Oh,
yes. Well, there's no doubt. For some strange reason, well, not really strange, but the United Nations has really been quite quiet about COVID-19. Although the UNDP, United Nations Development Program people have actually responded, but at the highest level of at the United Nations, including the United Nations Security Council, there has been very little that I've heard, written, otherwise, that says, okay, here's an ecological disaster looming that we're having. It's looming and it's here. This is what we need to do globally. And I think that's a real issue. It gets me right back to the United Nations Security Council. You would think that the planet Earth under attack, it is under attack, that would be the highest priority in terms of consultations, dialogue, and here's some recommendations that need to be fulfilled by all countries. But that says everything to me. There are some people, maybe in some countries, who don't want that collaboration. We know that. We have we saw that with the vaccines. We've got a vaccine, Pfizer, vaccine, Moderna, vaccine, Oxford, others coming along. We've got the vaccine in Russia, vaccine in China, and so on. But they're all, like a lot of the issues that we're facing, including conflicts, wars, and so on. There's a huge movement now, which is really dangerous, I think, to further divisions across the globe. We saw it in the United States, nationalism, nationalism, populism, and extreme populism, nationalism, and so on. We see it in Europe with Brexit and the UK, when we should be saying, how can we work together? We have everything to lose. The virus, pandemics, respect no borders. The ocean is shared by all, and so on and so forth. Here's what we need to do collectively. And this is a shame. It's a shame that the United Nations Security Council has not come up with this. It doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. But it's a disaster, really, for humanity and the planet by not doing so. And I think that's sort of the message that has to go to the United Nations General Assembly and to Antonio Guterres and so on and so forth. That's just not good enough. That is not good enough. We need leadership right now that we can trust and in which we can have confidence. But in terms of your question, no doubt. But I can see all the reasons why it's not happening, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for your response, and thank you everyone for your questions. They were really good. At this moment, so Meredith, who asked a question earlier, she posted a follow-up response, but it didn't go through. So I'm just going to put it on the chat for all of you to read. And I think she's very happy to engage in discussions on anyone who is happy to as well. So I've put her email in. Dr. George, before we go on to announce the winners of your book giveaway, is it all right if you mind, do you mind putting your email in the chat box for anyone who would like to contact you? Or
no problem.
Would that be something? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And my email is also on the last slide. I know that the session will be is being recorded, so my email is also on the last slide of the recording.
Perfect. Yeah, I can put it on the chat for you as well if you like.
If you don't mind.
Just
Yeah,
from the last slide, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
look forward to questions again. Absolutely.
So George, is this the same email that we've been in contact with you so far?
I'm sorry.
Is the email the same one that we have been in contact with you?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll put that in the chat very shortly. Just trying to pull it up. If not, We will continue to put, I think Christina will put the link to the attendance for all of you to mark it in the chat again if you've missed it the first time. But I will now let Dr. George have the honor of sharing with all of you here again tonight the winners of his book giveaway. So if you don't already know yet, Dr. George had kindly agreed to give away 2 signed copies of his book, Survival, One Health, One Planet, One Future, which he did mention in his presentation earlier. So, Dr. George, if you'd like to announce the winners, and we can
Yes,
put it on the slide.
I'm pleased to do that. So the winners of the book are Sasha Knopf. She's with the Institute for International Animal Health / One Health, FLI. And the second winner is Alex Lee, who's with the Royal Veterinary College. So I congratulate them for winning, and I do hope that you will find the volume to be of informative, and do send me any questions that you may have. Thank you. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Dr. George. I'm not sure why my slide isn't moving, but it's meant to show the winners, but I'm sorry that it's not there. So if you're in here with us, you will receive an email from us, and we'll get your address to process how the book will be given to you. But thank you so much for being here with us again tonight, Dr. George. That was indeed a delightful presentation, and thank you for fielding all those questions. I think everyone thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm going to stop the recording at this point, and